Hello, and welcome to Leadership and Feedbacks. And we'll talk about the subject of giving and a little bit receiving feedback as a leader. This last week was feedback week, and I thought maybe cover some highlights today. And so let's get started. So the first thing that I think is really important about feedback is, it's a big part of your role as a leader. And sometimes the feedback you might be giving would be welcome feedback, and sometimes it might be unwelcome. And they're both important, actually, right? So, being able to give good feedback, especially in the moment, especially in public, for something good that happens, or as a celebration of somebody really living up to the values of your organization or your team, or doing something that you're trying to train people up that you value. But when it comes to the unwelcome feedback, there's a little bit more to it. And one of the things that I'd like to impart is the importance of, if you want your feedback to be effective, meaning have some particular objective outcome, then you might need to do a little bit of prep work, or at least a quick check of yourself in your own state. So the three things that I'd like to have you focus on are, first, what is the outcome you're actually looking for? Do you want the person that you're going to be giving feedback to, do you want them to respond or just receive, right? Do you want them to change? If so, how? Those sorts of things, to make sure that the next couple of questions are going to make sense in light of what you really want to achieve. And the second thing is to ponder what approach you might have that is most likely to lead to that outcome. And by that I mean, it could be that given the situation, given the outcome, and given the person, even if it's something that they did that was really wrong, let's say, you might know that the best way to get them to open up to the feedback is to come in more gently with your approach and get yourself into the conversation gently. Or it might be something that was very major, maybe even very immediate, and you need to make an impact. And for that, you might need to be intentional about showing, if not anger, at least some concern, some significant concern, to put some energy behind what it is that you're saying to get their attention. Like if you're normally very calm, you might want to, on purpose, not be quite so calm so that they get that. You might also use that to affect even just your choice of words, even if it's not going to affect so much your choice of tone. But the important thing is that you're choosing a tone, and that you're choosing words, and you're choosing an approach that you think, at least, is going to be effective at achieving the outcome. Otherwise, really the feedback is serving maybe some more base need that you might have, as opposed to serving a need of, making the organization better, making the person a better team member, or just making your relationship with them better. And the final thing, in terms of preparation, is to make sure you're in the right state of mind. And the first two questions are really aimed at making sure you're in the right state of mind by thinking about your outcome, thinking about your approach. Really, those are thinking about yourself, right? So just a final check: are you in the right state of mind for productive interaction? And again, this comes back to, if the interaction is going to require you to be calm and you're not in the calm state, then this may not be the best moment if you can afford to come back at it a little bit later. But that quick mental inventory, those three things, can be a big help in getting the outcome you want. And so again, just a quick review, and then we'll move on to some other fun stuff, right? So what is the outcome that you're looking for? 2, have you thought of an approach, and what is that approach that you believe will create that outcome? And then, are you in the right state of mind? So with that, let's move on to the second part, right? So timing and venue. So again, let's just put ourselves in mind of having to deliver maybe some tough feedback, or some feedback about something that really didn't go well. Timing, right? So maybe that's the kind of feedback that should be delivered immediately, but maybe not. And that time can, if they already know that didn't go well, a little bit of time might give room for some reflection, room for you and or the other person or people even to get into a calmer state, more productive, and able to troubleshoot. And then venue, of course, right? So if the feedback in question is something that in a public venue is going to really sort of have an outsized effect on that person's reputation or put them on in public on the defense, you might create problems that you don't really need to have for yourself, for that person, or even other people by doing something publicly that should be done private. So think a little bit about that. So let's talk. We talked already about is immediate feedback warranted, and again, if you're doing one-to-ones, and you should be doing one-to-ones, I know opinions vary on that, but if you do them right, I think they're valuable, and maybe we'll cover that in another space in the future. Is public feedback warranted? And we talked about how maybe not, but let's talk briefly about a case where something might be public required, even for something that's major. And that's if in the guidance you've gotten from your HR department, for example, there might be something where somebody's doing a harassing behavior or something to that nature, where it's important for everybody, your company, for you, for the people involved, and quite frankly, for the person who may be feeling harassed, for at least a part of the feedback to come in public and immediately. So you do need to be sensitive to that. And I would recommend, honestly, just review what your company policies on these things are. There's usually trainings, and they'll drill into kind of what the shades of gray are and what the things are that are definitely need immediate feedback versus the things that you might be able to do in another venue. But having a good sense of that is compatible with your own company's HR policies is pretty important, both for the company policy enforcement, but also, again, for the real impact that certain types of bad things can have on the people who are involved or present even. And that brings me to the final sort of element of just wrapping that up. It's sort of covered in the other two, but do others present need to see a response? I indicated a second ago this HR element, but even if it's not an HR element, let's say there's some pillar that you value, ownership, let's say, and somebody does something that was really a big violation of ownership, and you're in a public venue, you may not want to go super deep on that and talk about all the corrective actions and everything, but you might want to mention in public that what is ownership, how does ownership apply to this, and at least get the topic on record in front of other people, because again, you want to use, when you have them, a teaching moment to give people the feel for the culture you're trying to create and the principles that you have, or the pillars, if you call them that. So I would say, again, normally for negative feedback, I have a bias towards doing that more privately, but there are some circumstances where at least part of the feedback, or at least part of the acknowledgement of the issue even, can and should be done in public. And so let's move on and talk a little bit about how to create receptivity. So let's imagine this scenario. And again, let's think of this in sort of a one-to-one or even a special purpose meeting you might have with somebody. And I'd like to give a couple of different ideas on things that you can do to help make sure that the other person has the most opportunity to be receptive to feedback. The first is really the setup. Like, are they expecting feedback already? Is it obvious that there's going to be some feedback? Have you indicated that there's going to be some feedback? Will they even remember the incident? That's a danger, for example, if it's something smaller but important to you and too much time passes. So one thing you can do to give people either a moment or even some actual time ahead of the interaction is you can tell somebody, for example, what topics do you have for a one-on-one on Thursday to open up that subject matter? And you could do this if you normally arrange your topics for your one-to-ones a little bit in advance over a messaging platform or email or something, that would be fine. And then you can just say in that exchange that I want to discuss whatever the topic is that you have the feedback on. That's one thing that you can do is set up, basically making sure that they're expecting some feedback, so that when you get in there and you're wanting to deliver that feedback, they're not like completely blindsided, and you might get sort of a shields up reaction just because they weren't expecting that. Their head was someplace else, and you won't get the best response from them if they're not mentally prepared to receive. The other thing that you can do kind of in the moment more, as opposed to kind of in advance, is to, and again, this is for stuff that's less maybe high level stuff, but if you have a small piece of feedback that you think would genuinely help them, you can ask them, are you open to some feedback on that? Or you can just say, I have some feedback, as just even a transition. So of course, for the question of, are you open to feedback? The only correct answer is yes, of course. But just taking that beat to sort of raise the topic that there's some feedback coming. If they say no, they're not open to feedback, again, maybe, their pet just died or something, and they're not in a frame of mind, and they're confessing to you they're not in a frame of mind. And if that does happen, then you can ask, well, when would be a good time for you to get some feedback? So, because again, real life happens, there might be a really good reason why somebody's not ready in the moment to receive feedback, but you still need to impart it. So you can use a little bit of a soft approach. My personal tendency is to use the soft approach while it works. And if I still need to accomplish something and the soft approach isn't working, then I sort of get progressively more insistent that, no, we're going to do this. That works best for me and my own personality. I train the people around me to be responsive to that. The ones who respond to a softer input or a softer touch have an easier time of things, and the ones who don't catch that or respond to that or work well with that, will get exposed to sort of a different side of me. But I always try to keep it professional and collegial, of course. So when you do get into beyond that sort of setting the stage or getting people ready, another thing that you can use is an inquiry, right? So if there's some sort of conflict that's going on, likely there's more than one version of the story. It may even be difficult to know what really happened depending on the nature of it. And so you can, for example, start with a question. Again, a technique that I'm pretty comfortable with, a very little Socratic sometimes in the way that I approach things. But so let's say, for example, you just got out of a meeting that didn't go well, in your opinion, and the person you're giving feedback to was a major presenter, or at least an important presenter in that, or had some important interaction. You can just open it up and say, how do you think that went? And that's kind of a pregnant question. It's a leading question. And if they're very self-aware, they may use that as a trigger to say, well, parts of it went well and parts of it didn't, and then you can kind of get into that. But if they don't believe or won't admit that something didn't go well, then you're not aligned. And that's a good thing for you to know, right? If you're super convinced that that did not go well and you've got reasons why, and they are just not even aware or won't admit it, then you know a little bit better the work you have to do. You can't just go running assuming that they're ready to receive feedback on something that they don't even think is a problem. So it tells you basically where to start. And that's very important information. But you can also use this to get their version of a situation that, again, might have more than one perspective to it. So again, valuable information for you. So for example, if there's a conflict between two people and you've heard from the second person a version of events, just taking that version and running with it is probably not going to result in consistently good results. So at least getting the person you're in front of kind of on record of their version of events and give you a chance to see, are these versions even close? It'll give you the data sometimes that you need to figure out which part is sort of actionable, that's clearly true and both parties agree that it's true, versus which part you may or may not be able to do anything with, because it might just be perceptions or judgments. But at any rate, that's really important. I call that sort of step the inquiry. And there's a sort of elephant in the room in this space, which is, there's something called the sandwich feedback formula. And I don't know, earlier in my career, I kind of liked the idea. Because again, I tend to try to manage and lead from a positive perspective as much as I can. So I'm much more comfortable giving positive feedback than negative. And I have to be much more thoughtful about getting myself even ready to deliver negative feedback. And so I like the idea that we might talk about something positive and talk about the negative thing, and then talk about something positive. But, opinions vary on how good that is of an idea. And there are some real dangers with it that I'll say them briefly and then move on and talk about what I like to do. But one of the dangers is you can dilute your message. Let's say the feedback you have in the middle of the sandwich is really important that they not lose sight of, and they need to make a change. If you give them positive and then you need to make a change and then positive, you might wash out and they might only take away the positive or not realize the magnitude of the change you're needing them to make based on the middle. So I would caution, if you're tending towards using sandwich, there's maybe an adjustment you could make to that idea, which is, if truly something good happened, but also something bad happened, or they're generally very good about a thing, but it didn't go well once, those are situations where I think it's very natural to do a little bit of the good and the bad, somewhat like a sandwich. But it has to be genuine, because people will pick up if you're just trying to manipulate them by giving them positive, okay, here's some negative thing to swallow, and then here's positive. People will pick up on that, at least some of them, and that will not go well for your building a quality relationship with them. So here's the situation that I think that this really works in. If somebody is generally reliable and you've come to rely on them, you can lead into with, I really appreciate that you're usually on top of whatever it is, right? Quality or, good release planning, whatever that might be. And then get into the one, but this last one, we had the following problem, and we really can't have that problem. So you can kind of get into the nuts and bolts of what is the thing that wasn't good, and why was it not good, and what is the change that you need to see. For the third part, again, I wouldn't suggest just reiterating the first positive, but your users are great. I do think it can be valuable to express optimism, because it can be somebody, especially who is a high performer and is used to getting praised for really getting it done and getting a good job, but they didn't this time. You can sap their energy, but you can give some of that energy back by expressing some optimism at the end. You can use something, a combination of "I'm counting on you," which expresses that you trust them. You can reference that this is something you really believe that they can handle, which expresses confidence. So you've got some options here, but I wouldn't lay it on thick is all. And I would not just go Google up how to do a sandwich feedback and do that. I think that a little bit of danger in there. Finally, before moving on to other things, I would like to talk about one other thing that you can do in this type of a scenario. Again, this is a little bit of creating receptivity, but also a little bit of delivering feedback itself. Another thing you can do is frame what needs to happen next as an opportunity. And again, this is for somebody who's you believe can do way better. They may have stumbled, or they may have had a bad day or a bad week or whatever it is. But once you've established that there's a problem and you feel like you've gotten some acknowledgement that there's a problem, instead of just rolling in at that moment with exactly what you want them to do in a very prescriptive format, you can do the following, either because you know it works with this person or as a test to find out if it works with this person. You can frame what needs to happen next more in a question, kind of like that Socratic method, and as a sort of a challenge or an opportunity, right? So, and again, this may not work, but if it doesn't work, you're actually learning something important about this person, where they're at, and how you need to lead with them in the future. So you can ask for solutions before you mandate your solutions. And in fact, when you get good at this and you're talking to somebody who really knows their business, they may actually have a better idea of a quality solution or a better or a more complete solution than you do, especially if they've been thinking about whatever went wrong. So if it's a technical thing, they may know that you can make a whole class of problems not even possible by some change to the system or the architecture or a deployment procedure or something like that. Same thing is true in a healthcare scenario, right? Having a better operational procedure for something, as opposed to, hey, you don't forget that thing, but operationalizing how nobody can forget that thing because it's part of the procedure. They may come up with that as opposed to just receiving what you're doing in the moment as, okay, I will not forget that thing. So giving them a moment to propose their own solutions, especially though, even if they're not better than your solution, even if they have your same solution, if it comes from them, then their fingerprints are on it, and you should have less difficulty being able to sort of recruit them into actually doing that and holding them accountable, since it's their idea that you're saying yes to. So don't miss the opportunity to frame the feedback or the solution or the correction to the feedback, the change, as an opportunity, and find out, is this person capable of coming up with a good quality way on their own to make this better that they can commit to. Don't expect everybody to do great at this. People vary pretty widely in how naturally introspective they are, or how natural problem solvers they are, how receptive they are to feedback, right? Do they close down or not? So things will vary a lot, and you got to kind of roll with that. But those are a couple things. The setup for receptivity, making an inquiry for receptivity, doing a good version of kind of the good and bad as an encouragement where appropriate. Again, if they've done something just horribly wrong and there's not a lot positive to say, don't artificially put it in there. I think it's the bottom line. And then opportunity framing when you can. But let's move on to the fourth part, the fourth element, which is something that I try to do very consistently, even when things may not be kind of like a difficult conversation. This is just generally a good thing to do. You can overdo it, but it's kind of hard. So I call this read back before feedback. And the way I like to set this up when I teach it to people is that, candidly, nobody wants to hear your feedback in a difficult situation, right? They might want to get validation from you that they're right and other people are wrong. They might just want to avoid the topic. But generally speaking, people don't want your feedback. There are some exceptions to that, but for the most part, don't think that they want to hear your feedback. And so this relates again a little bit to receptivity, but I treat it as its own special topic. You increase your chances of being able to reach someone if they know and feel that you've heard and understood them before you move on to, and here's what's wrong with you, basically, right? So if you just roll in, I have some feedback for you, and blurt it out, if there's a complicated situation or a nuanced situation, they might just feel like you're not fully informed and just rolling in and steamrolling them. So if there is a need for you to, for example, get them to say what happened in their own words, or tell the story or their perspective or whatever, what I teach is read back before feedback. So paraphrase back to them what they have said to you, because presumably they put what's important to them or their important beliefs or judgments and those things in there. So paraphrase it back to them. That's the read back, and get their acknowledgement that you've gotten it right before proceeding. Taking this moment gives more humanity to the interaction. It gives them a chance to feel heard before they have to listen. And it values them, because there might be something in there you don't already know also. And at least you're open to the fact that there might be something you don't already know. And I actually keep this super simple because that's what works best for me. I literally will say to people when I'm getting ready to do this, let me say that back to you to make sure I got it right. Literally almost those exact words every time. Because again, doing things the same way every time is kind of my thing. And that tends to work pretty good. And again, it's not going to solve all your problems, but it does give you one more opportunity to get past somebody's shields and into the productive part of the conversation. So after that special topic, I think the next thing I'd like to cover is sort of a final bonus topic, and then we'll end this space. And this is receiving feedback. It's not all about giving feedback. If you're a leader, even if you're not a leader, but for sure if you're a leader, you need to be really good at receiving feedback as well, because generally speaking, other leaders, whether they're peers or especially above you in the organization, they're going to expect you to be able to receive feedback, and in many cases, blunt feedback, not very skilled feedback, terse feedback, harsh feedback, any combination of those. And the higher on the executive level you go in terms of who your direct manager is, this is not uniformly true, but you need to expect that the feedback might get harsher and terser, right? More terse, because they don't have a lot of time to sugarcoat things. And if something went wrong that doesn't work for them, they want to be able to tell you right away, get it off their chest, and move on to the next thing. So I'm trying to teach you how to take a more deliberate attack that takes a little more time. And when you can afford to do so, that's better, no matter what level you are in the organization. But the higher up you go, the more you need to be able to accept and receive and respond to appropriately blunt, harsh, terse feedback. So I've got a couple of pieces of guidance for you on this, just things to think about, 6 of them actually. So the first, as before, is your mindset. When you realize feedback is coming, it might, maybe you'll be the one who's surprised, or maybe you'll know in advance that it's coming. But mentally prepare yourself to receive it as is, meaning, your path past the feedback is through it. So just recognize that and receive it for what it is. Whether or not you agree with the feedback, you do need to be able to receive it and understand it, and you're going to have to be able to think about it, and not just go into pure defense mode, because it is possible that you actually need to change something, even if you didn't think before getting the feedback that you did need to change something. You're going to learn something about how other people are perceiving you, even if your performance is great. If the perception of your performance is not great, you might learn about it through feedback, and that's valuable. So the second thing I would say is preparation. Again, this is, you can't always do, but if you do know in advance that feedback is coming, because you know something didn't go well, I would recommend jotting down some contemporaneous notes, as they would say. Gather a few facts, make sure that you know enough about the situation that if you're asked a few questions about it, you can say valuable and true things about whatever it was that happened. You don't want to be the person who's bringing false or incomplete information into a situation where you're going to respond to some feedback. And then the third one, I kind of alluded to this already, is gratitude. And it can be difficult. I understand. I've had to receive harsh feedback in the past, and I would just say that the fact that you're getting feedback, as opposed to having somebody silently have formed an opinion about you that is unproductive for your career growth, is something to be grateful of, because you're not guaranteed an opportunity to explain yourself. A lot of times we run around and tell ourselves stories about what happened and how we would explain it, to fast about it or whatever. But the truth is, you may upset somebody, or something may have gone bad that you didn't notice, or even if you did notice, just the fact that you don't get feedback about it is not necessarily a positive sign. That could be a sign that somebody has figured out, I know all about this person. And you may now have something negative that you don't really know about out in the world about you in your leadership chain. So even though it sounds weird, having an attitude of gratitude when you're receiving feedback, the feedback itself, even if it's not pleasant to receive, the fact that somebody's taking the time to give you feedback, even if it's blunt, even if it's terse, and potentially even if it's harsh, the fact that they're taking time to give you that feedback means they're giving you something of value. If you disagree with it, you're learning something about how you were perceived, and that knowledge is super valuable. So I would say that take the gratitude all the way, right? Don't make it not genuine, but you can legitimately say, if you have that perspective, if you've adopted that perspective on purpose, you can legitimately say, thank you for your feedback, and it will be true, right? If you realize that receiving feedback, even uncomfortable, difficult, harsh, whatever feedback, is bringing you value of something you need to do better at, or value of something where you're perceived a way that you'd like to not be perceived. Either of those are valuable to you. Okay. So let's talk about kind of where your opinion may differ about the feedback you received. You may not agree with it, right? So perspective is the next topic, right? So if you have a different perspective, or especially if you have additional information, you may or may not get a chance to share it. And again, this is a little bit of something you need to just feel your way through, because depending on your relationship with this person, offering up that additional information or that alternate perspective may come off as being defensive in an unproductive way. So you may have to use what you know about your relationship with that person, their communication style, or set the tone, right? So you can, and again, similar to something I said earlier, you can ask somebody, are you open to some additional information about that, right? So instead of just rowing into but, here's this other way of looking at it, you can take a beat and try to prepare the ground if you really want to deliver that information that you don't know. Now, they might tell you, no, I'm not open to other information. Well, now you know. Or they might say, okay, but only if it's really relevant or something, right? So you got to be prepared to just go with what they say. But I think just going meta ultimately, but do you mind if I provide some additional context or my perspective or whatever it is, instead of leaping right into delivering it? If they give you permission to deliver it, then it's less likely to come off as just excuse making if you deliver it. Two more things I'd like to do, and then we'll call it a day. One, come with solutions. Again, this is or make up some if you can, if it's obvious what the solutions are. But be prepared with one or more options for solving the problem. So this can be difficult if it's a controversial issue. Your solution might not be the full-on remedy, but your solution could even be for something that's too complicated to just say, boom, here's what we're going to do. Your solution could be, I understand that this is an important thing. What I'd like to do is and then speak about process, right? So I'd like to be able to get some additional information from a couple people, and then I'll come back to you by the end of the week with a proposal or two about what we can do to make this better. So that's solution orientation. And that will be, for a good leader above you, that will be a relief to them. And it will be edifying to your stature as a leader that whether you have the actual solution already at hand or you're going to talk about solutioning rather than complaining about getting bad feedback. It puts you in a better stature. And then the final thing is commitment. And this is a one that I feel like it's actually easy on the receiving side to not get all the way there. So let your leader off the hook. Don't make them pester you about making a commitment or when you're going to do something or what you're going to do or that sort of thing. If once you've gotten to the point where it's clear what it is needs to happen next and when it needs to happen by, say that out loud. Make that commitment. What they can count on you for, what they can expect from you. What are you going to do? When are you going to do it by? And how are you going to deliver the outcome? And well, make it and then keep it is ultimately the thing about commitments, right? So some people keep all their commitments because they don't make enough commitments. Don't be that person. Make a quality commitment, something you can actually do, and then make sure you get it done. Those are all the topics that I had for today. That's kind of a bit of a week in review from last week for Feedback Week. A couple of questions for you. One, what part of Feedback Week was most valuable to you? You can either reply to the Feedback Week comment on one of the posts for Feedback Week or to the space, or send me a DM if you want to just tell me privately what you got the most value out of. And of course, as always, if there's any other topics that you would like to cover, like me to cover either in my posts or in a space or something like that, do reach out and share them. Let me know how you're getting on and go forth. Have a great week. Bye now.